Is UCLA basketball coach Mick Cronin looking to behave his way out of Westwood? All of that and a lot more in this curious situation.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Check it out. All right, now we got a lot to get through this show, but we're going to make fun of Mick Cronin for a good percentage of this show and what exactly the tyrant from Westwood is trying to do behind the scenes that maybe nobody else quite understands. Now, first, I've always listen. Mick Cronin is a good basketball coach. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you look at what he did at Cincinnati. Yes, the results really weren't there in the NCAA tournament. You got a couple Sweet 16s out of it, maybe, or one Sweet 16. But you won 70% of your games. He did a pretty good job. Was he Bobby Huggins? No, but overall, pretty good basketball coach. And he's obviously was able to carry some of that to Westwood. I mean, you look at it, he's made a Final Four during his time at UCLA, and he had another Sweet 16. But I think you also got to look at it, and you got to take some other things into account as well, is that all of that success was done with somebody else's players. And that is certainly something that, while not the entire story, needs to be put out there. I mean, this is a man that inherited Jaime Jaquez, Tiger Campbell, Jalen Clark. Again, now listen, he signed a couple of those guys who were already but they were already committed to UCLA at the time. So I guess he gets some credit, but overall, still not a great look. But Cronin, though, is a good basketball coach. We know that, but I think what you're starting to see, though, is that now that he's got a roster where it's just his own players, his own talent, you're starting to wonder a little bit, man, what exactly is going on in Westwood? Because this is not a very good basketball team. Let's just talk about, look at this roster now. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I'm going to continue to say this. How many of these players on UCLA would play at Arizona? And the question, I think the answer is probably next to none. Adem Boda definitely would play at the U of A. Totally get that. But other than that, I don't really know anybody else that's playing at the U of A. Dylan Andrews, their point guard? No. Now, you could say that, Kylan Boswell hasn't been very good this year. I get that, and you would be right. Kylan Boswell hasn't been very good this year. But he's still – I don't know that any coach is taking Dylan Andrews over him, because we've seen that when Kylan Boswell is playing really well, that he is still one of the more talented point guards in the country. I mean, that's that kind of goes without saying. But Dylan Andrews – not really much of an assist guy, not really much of an efficiency from the field guy, just not a great, just not a really impactful basketball player. And I think coming out of high school, a lot of people thought that he would be that, but he has certainly not been that. And not only has he not been that, he hasn't been close to being that. Look at some of the other players that are playing. Will McClendon, not good. I still don't quite know how Will McClendon at UCLA is playing, and Mick Cronin has essentially said that about some of these players. We're going to get to more of that. Sebastian Mack, I don't mind Sebastian Mack. I think on the wing position, he's not bad as a freshman, but obviously Mick Cronin has destroyed him this year, basically saying that, well, not basically saying that if he had better players, that Sebastian Mack would be playing 5 minutes a game. Sebastian Mack is probably the second best player on this roster. And then you've got the international guys, which is another totally interesting situation, because you've got Mara up close. And not only do you have Mara the international guy, you've got a couple other ones. Now, I do think that it's fair to ask what exactly Mick Cronin going with the international approach. Mick Cronin going with the international approach is somewhat interesting, mainly because he doesn't really have the patience, the stick-to-itiveness that that somebody like Tommy Lloyd does. When you're bringing an international player, they're used to a different style of basketball, and they've got to be able to play through some mistakes. And Mick Cronin certainly isn't doing that. And Mick Cronin, I don't think, is doing anybody any favors by screaming at the kids, by essentially, and I just don't know that development is ever really going to be there under Mick Cronin for some of these kids, because it's going to stagnate. And not only is it going to stagnate, you've got to be able to realize, how, what makes these players tick. And not only what makes these players tick, what makes just all of these guys go. And it feels to me like he's just kind of throwing things at the wall. And I think we're going to talk about the future here in a little bit. But when you start throwing things at the wall and just kind of seeing what sticks, that can be a little bit of an issue. And I think that's exactly what's happening. It reminds me a lot of the end of the Ben Howland era, except that Ben Howland was getting good players at the end. That is the big difference. Ben Howland basically couldn't recruit Los Angeles anymore. Because for a variety of reasons, those coaches essentially boxed him out. And not only did they box him out, so he had to go national, but it actually kind of worked in a weird way, because you got a Shabazz Muhammad, you got a Kyle Anderson, a Jordan Adams, a Tony Parker, you actually got pretty good players. But Mick Cronin is not able to do that. I mean, you look at next year's recruiting class, and next year's recruiting class for him there is nothing. It is non-existent. So the whole, let's just go get some international players and let's get that quick fix, that certainly doesn't seem to be in the cards as something that is a viable alternative for him. But this roster at UCLA is just not good. I mean, Arizona, I believe, is a 9-point favorite. And not only is Arizona a 9-point favorite, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that line starts to jump a little bit more as we come closer to tip off, because not only do we come closer to tip off, we also are kind of at the point where you look at position by position. Arizona's just better across the board. Will McClendon or Caleb Love. I mean, you talk about a massive mismatch. Then you look at Sebastian Mack, Pella Larson. You look at Keyshawn Johnson. Some of these players, again, Adem Bona is pretty much the only one that you're like, all right, he can match up with he can match up with Arizona or whatever. This is just not a very talented team that he's going to be throwing out there. And honestly, that's on Mick Cronin. Listen, when you're at UCLA, you should be able to get really, really good basketball players. I mean, look at Steve Alford was not a good basketball coach. I think that we all know that at this point. But Steve Alford was able to get the players that he needed. And, he, like I said, he left a really talented roster for Mick Cronin. Mick Cronin was able to take advantage of. But, that was also 3 or 4 years ago. Jaime Jaquez is not back. Tiger Campbell's not back, and we're going to find out what exactly Mick Cronin can do. But a big reason why, let's just be honest here, that this isn't necessarily working for Mick Cronin is because of the way that he is putting himself out there in press conferences and games, and we're going to talk about all that. But first, FanDuel. All right, now you watch FanDuel, and you look at FanDuel, and you're like, all right, I'd like to be able to bet on Arizona against UCLA. I think that Arizona is better than UCLA. You would be right. FanDuel is the place you want to go. Go check it out. Again, put down $5, and depending on the offer, you could get $150 or $200 in free bets if that $5 bet hits. That simple, that easy. Again, with FanDuel, it's a great thing because your money's good, and we all know too that with FanDuel there is a nice little comfort factor involved, knowing that again your money is good. And let's be honest, there's nothing that's more enjoyable than betting on a game, or even if you don't have an interest, when you bet on a game, it becomes a lot more fascinating. FanDuel, check it out. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk about what's going on with Mick Cronin. All right, let's go back to Sean Miller for a little bit. And anybody that has followed me at all over the years knows that I was not a huge fan of Sean Miller. A big reason why is that I thought he was just kind of a jerk, to be honest with you. And one of the things that he would do, and that I never understood, and granted, the officials were definitely in the wrong, because you can't have officials putting bounties out on players, or on coaches, saying, if you tee them up, there's a trip to Cabo. That just can't happen. I mean, duh. But that did happen. But Sean Miller was also kind of the creator of his own demise to a certain degree, and that Sean Miller went out of his way to be a jerk to officials. I have never understood why a coach would go out of his way to be a jerk to an official. It makes absolutely no sense to me. Even if you don't like him, these are the coaches, or these are the people that are going to be deciding 50-50 calls. And again, take this for what it's worth. I've refed my refereeing experience. I've refed a lot of men's league basketball games in Tucson over the years, thousands of games. And you know what? If it's a 50-50 call, and it can go either way, and one guy has been a total jerk to me all game, I don't care. I'm not giving you that call. If it's a 50-50 and it's totally at my discretion as to what I go, I am not giving the jerk the call. And, Miller would do that all the time. I mean, he would get in officials' faces. Yeah, but I say that to tell you this. Mick Cronin is on an entirely different plateau than Sean Miller. Mick Cronin calls officials MFers. He calls them every single name in the book. First of all, I don't know how he's allowed. First of all, I don't know he's allowed to do that. That makes absolutely no sense to me, that the officials should be putting up with that. Again, you literally have a guy going out there pointing at you, screaming at you, calling you every name in the book. And we all have TVs. Like, you don't even need to be a lip reader to be able to say, man, he definitely is calling that dude a lot of bad names. Again, that makes no sense to me. So Mick Cronin, then, he is designing his own catastrophe. And then he goes into these press conferences, and every single press conference, first of all, he blames the officials. And then if he blames the officials, it's always, I'm going to talk with the headquarters about this. Well, after a while, it's kind of the boy that cried wolf, dude, that, you're just looking. Yeah, every game isn't the official's fault. But if you watch and you follow Mick Cronin, every single game is the official's fault. It is amazing. And then he goes in there and he plays, or he throws his players under the bus as well. He calls them stupid. He says they're not good enough. Well, I got news flash for you, Mick Cronin. These are the players that you recruited. You don't have any more. You can't rely on any more of Steve Alford's holdovers to be able to say, all right, well, guys, take care of this. Tiger Campbell, Jaime Jaquez, Clark, they're all gone. And granted, I know that he had to sign some of them. I get it. But that ship is over. Or that ship has sailed. So you go into it, and so what do you have now? You have an isolated little dude. You've got a coach who is screaming nonstop at officials. And again, when I say screaming nonstop, in college basketball, I don't know that I've seen anybody that treats officials like Mick Cronin. Every single call, it's MF-er, this, that, the other. Compare and contrast that to Tommy Lloyd. Tommy Lloyd, now granted, Tommy Lloyd is far more of a happy-go-lucky type coach. I like that very much about him. But Tommy Lloyd can get in an official's ear when he needs to. But watch Tommy Lloyd before a game. He's talking with the officials, and even if he doesn't care at all what the officials have to say, it's still kind of a, hey, how was the fishing trip last weekend or whatever? Listen, you don't have to do that, but it also, if an official is on a 50-50 call and they're like, oh, all right, well, Tommy Lloyd over here, Mick Cronin over there. Yeah, Tommy Lloyd's getting that. You don't need to go out of your way to be a jerk for absolutely no reason. And it feels like Mick Cronin goes out of his way to be a jerk for absolutely no reason. And that act wears thin. I mean, that act wears really thin. And I think we're getting to the point now where you almost start wondering, are you trying to behave your way out of UCLA? Because either the administration has not said anything, which I find baffling that you would have an administration that wouldn't say anything about that kind of conduct and that kind of behavior, or you're you basically have an administration that's asleep at the wheel watching this, because this can't continue to go on. This is not only is this unhealthy, it's just a terrible example to set. And you're not going to get players that are going to want to come play in this. I mean, he's already dealing with some bad stuff. I mean, look at a couple of the 5-star kids that he brought in. Peyton Watson. Peyton Watson barely played at UCLA. Peyton Watson goes off, and he's a key contributor for the defending champion, the Denver Nuggets. You look at some of the other guys, the Amari Bailey, kind of the same situation. Granted, he's not a key NBA contributor, but I just don't know how he's going to continue to get players, and we're gonna talk about that in a second. And if you're a player, are you really looking to go all out for a coach that if you screw up, man, he's going to throw me under the bus. He's going to call me stupid. He's going to say every last name in the book about me. And the other thing, too, is that he calls him out by name. Again, Sebastian Mack's a pretty good freshman wing. Is he great? No. Is he going to be a lottery pick after his first year? No. But he's pretty good, and he's somebody that looks like he has some NBA potential. Granted, that cheap shot that he put against Utah totally soured me on him. But overall, he's a good basketball player. If you're him, are you really going through a brick wall for Mick Cronin after he essentially just called you an idiot, or said that you're not good enough, or that you would play 5 minutes on a good team? That stuff just doesn't work, man. And you see it now with the roster that he has. Look at, and I guess just compare and contrast Tommy Lloyd again. Both of Mick Cronin and Tommy Lloyd inherited loaded rosters from their predecessors. Tommy Lloyd had Ben Mathurin, Christian Coloco, Julius Tabellis, Dalen Terry, and then obviously you had some very talented players that we've gone over with at UCLA. Mick Cronin doesn't have any of that. Mick Cronin lost players, and whereas Tommy Lloyd has been able to retool to where he's got a starting lineup of a Caleb Love, who's going to be an All-American this year. Pella Larson, who's an all-conference type player. Keyshawn Johnson, who had a major role on a team that was just in the national title game. Umar Ballo, leader of men, coming over from Gonzaga. Arizona's got a loaded roster, and they got a loaded roster coming off the bench. UCLA doesn't have any of that, and a big reason why is because, Tommy Lloyd is able to get players in here that want to play for him. They see a coach that is pushing the pace. They see a coach that can get on his players. I mean, we've all seen him the way that he's gotten on Kylan Boswell, but after that, it is a slap on the butt. It's like, let's go do this, or something like that. There is none of that with Mick Cronin, and that's just kind of where the difference is. And I think that's where the difference is always going to reside. So I don't see this thing ending well at all in Westwood, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, Fire TV, my friends, Fire TV channels, your sports destination. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. All kinds of good stuff there, from sports to movies, you name it. There's all kinds of good stuff. Everybody's getting it. And again, listen, when it's with Amazon, everybody knows this. Amazon is absolutely the wave of the future. If you know anybody that anybody that knows anything, even me, knows that Amazon is the wave of the future, and that everybody's getting involved with Amazon because everybody's got a little bit of a stay in the game with Amazon. Again, this is your sports destination. To learn more, visit Amazon.com Locked On Fire TV. Check it out. Again, very happy that they're here. And again, this is where it's at. There's going to be all kinds of sports, and not only that, it's going to continue to grow. There's nothing with Amazon that just kind of fizzles. Everything continues to grow. So check it out. Amazon.com/fire or Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Thanks for keeping Locked On Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's look to the future at Westwood. You're going into the Big Ten next year. Now, granted, Big Ten basketball stinks, but so does Pac-12 basketball, and obviously UCLA really struggled this year. What does that mean for the future? Well, first and foremost, Mick Cronin has talked about how mean about how mean certain crowds can be, which is always cracks me up. Well, he's in for something new in the Big Ten, because those are going to be rowdy crowds that actually have fans. This isn't going to be like going to Oregon State or Washington State or Haas Pavilion or Desert Financial, where there's 15 fans in the entire arena. This isn't going to be that, my friend. This is going to be entirely different for you. This is going to be a much different experience. And I'm going to be curious to see how this actually plays out for him, because I think he's going to struggle in a big way. I think, first of all, I think he's going to have a crappy team. If the international players stick around, which I am far from sold that they're going to stick around, maybe they develop a little bit, but I can see a mass exodus. And when you look at recruiting coming in, he doesn't have any players. Look at Arizona. You got Carter Bryant, Shamari Phillips, Emmanuel Stephen, and they'll get a couple guys in the portal. You look at UCLA, you don't have any of that. And I think that they're going to continue to struggle in that. And I think like I said, I think that the Big Ten basketball stinks, but I also think that UCLA basketball is going to stink. And I just don't see this one ending well. Now, there's talk about, does he want to try to get the Louisville job? I guess I could see that possibly being the case. But if you're Louisville, are you really going to bring in a coach, especially Louisville, which is a pretty good job? Are you really going to bring in a coach that where you can pay them a lot of money, that has essentially seen a big time program fizzle out under his watch? I got real doubts that Louisville is going to do something like that. So Cronin could definitely be back next year, and that's just going to be a tough ride for him, because he's not going to have any talent. And outside of hitting some, unforeseen home run, this is going to be another issue for him. And not only is it going to be another issue for him, I think it's also going to be a spot where we're kind of at the game where you got to cut ties sooner than later, because this meltdown is not going to end well in the Big Ten, and it's going to be on a national platform. At least with Mick Cronin, some of these meltdowns, it's a little bit more confined because a lot of it's on the Pac-12 network, but this is going to be on ESPN, ABC, and it's not going to be good. And he doesn't handle well losing. So we'll find that out. As far as a prediction, though, for tonight or for Arizona UCLA, I think Arizona should smash UCLA. I think the UCLA game is probably going to be a little bit more difficult than USC, because at least Mick Cronin, we've talked about, he's actually a good coach. He has no self-control. I think that I think this is going to be a more difficult game for Arizona. But again, Arizona is just better across the board. Like I said, you got one player at UCLA that would play at Arizona. I'm going Arizona 83, UCLA 68. Keep in mind, UCLA shot the lights out in that first half against McHale. I don't see that happening again. And Arizona's got a lot to play for. Arizona can obviously lock up the Pac-12 championship. And if you lock up the Pac-12 championship, then things just become a lot easier for you. Plus, it would be nice to send Mick Cronin packing. Then after that USC game, I think it's going to be a little bit more of the same, a little bit of a different, more talent, obviously, at USC, but that roster and that program is not on steady footing this season at all, to put it mildly. So again, this is all up to Arizona, but if I'm a UCLA fan, I want to get rid of Mick Cronin. I believe that I should do better. I can do better. And not only that, I believe that I can get somebody of a little bit higher character than Mick Cronin, and somebody that's not going to always embarrass me. And again, I don't know that people like Mick Cronin are able to do inventory of themselves and say, man, here's where I'm messing up, or here's where I'm doing this, that. I don't know that that's really in the cards for him. So again, as always, we will see that. But as always, very, very much appreciate you guys making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. We're going to be back with you Friday, breaking down the UCLA game and getting you ready for USC basketball as well. Bear down, back the A, and keep it Locked On Wildcats.